Hello and welcome back to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind here with a quick guide how to take Brandenburg and form Prussia, and then how to play Prussia. Luckily those are pretty simple. So, the easiest nation outside of the Teutonic Order to form Prussia is Brandenburg. In fact, you start out with the Prussian ideas, which are absolutely amazing. 0.5 army tradition and -10 aggressive expansion impact to start, followed by 10% tax, which is meh. It's 10% negative cheaper stability cost, which is okay. Plus 20% morale is massive. It's equivalent to France's, although you get it one later. It's one reason why Prussia probably can have the strongest or second strongest army late game. Then you've got yearly army tradition decay, -1. Infantry combat ability, plus 20, which is really strong. 25 manpower, -10% recruitment costs. Tolerance of heretics, +1, and -5 development costs, with everything capping it off with a 5% discipline. So, Brandenburg Prussia is probably best suited to complete the achievements in Early Reich. I cannot say that word, sorry. Which is form in early Germany. And then you've got a fine goose step, which is form Prussia and have 125% discipline in your armies, which they can do fairly easily. And then there's also this army can take it all, which has 7% morale, which can be completed as anybody, but Brandenburg Prussia has one of the better chances at it. So starting off, in order to form the Kingdom of Prussia, you have to get to Admin Tech 10, so it's going to be a while if you start at the 1444 start date. And in order to do that, you have to be Protestant Reformed, own Königsberg, or a Danzig or Stolp, I guess. Pardon if I get any of the names wrong. So Königsberg's over here, Stolp and Danzig are here. I recommend trying to get both. You'll get a mission to take some of Pomerania's lands anyway. The issue is getting to these two provinces. They're connected by a land bridge, which makes taking them a lot easier than it used to be. You have to beat the Poland-Lithuanian blob there. So, first off, you usually start with a mission. In this case, I didn't. You usually get a mission to reclaim Neumark or conquer Silesia down here. You actually don't really care too much about the conquest of Neumark. You'll get an event for that. I usually recommend, though, you form an alliance with either Saxony, Bohemia, or Poland. Out of all of them, usually you get the alliance with 2 out of the 3. Usually they hate each other on the third one. So you can get the alliance here with Bohemia and Saxony, and they don't hate each other. But trying to get an alliance with Poland runs into some issues. I can probably do it, and that would be a smart move, and then I'd ally myself to Saxony since no one cares about them. The reason for that is it prevents any wars going on down here between you and your allies, which is a relief. Otherwise, Saxony and Bohemia tend to gang up and kill you, which is a bit of a downside. So you start out with about 57 development, making you a relatively small nation, although in the HRE you're like, I'd say like 5th or 6th in size, which is kind of nice. I mean, you're behind Austria, Bohemia, Bavaria, and I think even Pomerania at this point. No, you're actually ahead of Pomerania. Shame. Got that wrong. Anyway, what you're going to want to do is get your alliances set up, and rather than race over here to expand into the Teutonic Order, you only really want to expand early on into the German minors here. Anhalt, Lüneburg, Mecklenburg, or Magdeburg tend to be great targets early on. This is when your 10% reduced aggressive expansion comes in, meaning you can take 10% more land. And being in the HRE itself, that is invaluable because of the coalitions you can easily trigger against yourself. Can't count the amount of times I've got into coalition wars as either Brandenburg or Prussia. Usually Lüneburg doesn't get any allies, or Anhalt usually rivals you, which is kind of hilarious. And if you are lucky, there's a couple special events that can trigger early on. First off, you have an heir called Albrecht Achilles von Hohenzollern. If you look down here at Ansbach, that is actually the current ruler of Ansbach. Which means if he dies, or your ruler dies. I believe it's either, no, if your ruler dies and he becomes your ruler, what you will do is you will actually get a personal union over Ansbach down here, which is great. And then you will get an event which essentially gives you the option of keeping your union over Ansbach, which is not really worth it. It's only a 7 development province and usually gets killed by everybody around it early on. Or you can get an event called, it's like Endless Succession or something. It's got a really complicated name. It's not the same as the Bavarian one, but essentially it gives you 10% cheaper stability and 25% chance of getting a new heir. And it's really useful because it means that your dynasty almost never dies out. In fact, you've got a better chance of keeping your dynasty than the Austrians have of keeping theirs. Of course, they have an event for it. So essentially, set up your alliances, try and conquer this. I recommend rejecting the union over Ansbach. You'll get it initially, but then if you take that event, you'll lose it, which is fine. Their dynasty will still rule in this country, and there's always a chance you get another union, which is kind of hilarious. You do start out with pretty bad rulers. I do not recommend re-rolling this guy due to the chance of getting the union in an event, but I do recommend probably focusing admin tech or military tech, obviously avoiding diplomatic tech. Big reason is you really don't start running till mid to late game. Early on, your early game is okay because of the reduced aggressive expansion, but then it falls off while you're still stuck in these two idea groups, and only really picks up again once you've hit infantry combat ability. So what you want to do is stay here. You want to develop your nation, build up to your force limit. You can support a fair amount of troops. But the big thing is, at some point, assuming the Teutonic Order and Poland go to war, which they almost always do, they'll get an event called the Fate of Neumark, and it essentially will allow you to buy Neumark from the Teutonic Order for, I think it's 100 gold. So early on, it's quite expensive for you, and it'll probably put you into debt. Obviously, you have an option of getting money from your burghers to handle it, and I recommend you take that event because that gives you 9 development for free, and more importantly, removes them from the HRE on this side. Makes it harder for them to accidentally join it. Then you will usually get an event at some point called the Pomeranian Succession, which essentially says you've got claims to Pomerania. Well, you don't. You get claims on these two provinces, however, both Kolberg and Stolp. In which case you need Neumark to get to those anyway. But usually early on you can beat up Pomerania in a war on your own and take those two provinces. Usually Austria will say unlawful imperial territory and get mad at you, but they won't actually declare war. They can, so be a little careful. But as long as you haven't gone absolutely crazy conquering minor nations, which you can do, you can wipe out these guys really fast. You should be able to conquer them. And once you're bordering the Teutonic Order, it's a matter of waiting till either Poland declares war for the second time, because usually they only take like 2 or 3 provinces, or if they've taken like 4 or 5, declare war instantly and take both Danzig and Königsberg. I don't recommend you take their other provinces here, despite how lovely they look to take, because that will annoy Poland. And if you're allied to Poland, which you could easily be at the beginning of the game, it will usually break the alliance, but usually you can get away with 2 of them. At that point, you want to wait and just pretty much wait till you get to Admin Tech 10. Try and consolidate your position here. Maybe run for Emperor. I doubt you'll win. Austria is really high, but if you have Saxony and Bohemia on your side, it's always possible. A good ally in this area sometimes is Brunswick. They tend to conquer this region here, which can get them into trouble later on and can cut you off, but the best route I've found is trying to conquer this way, obviously being wary of the fact that there are a handful of free cities in the area you do have to be aware of. Trying to kill Lübeck or Hamburg early on is probably not in your best bet. They are really good late game to fight wars with, conquer them, and then demand all their money. I fought a war with Lübeck about 1560, and I was able to take almost 2,000 gold from them. So they actually fund you because your land is very poor, and worse, it's all forest. so trying to develop it is actually quite expensive. Probably one of the best provinces you'll end up with is Danzig. So that's interesting. And once you hit Admin Tech 10, you want to form Prussia, which does multiple things. First of all, it turns you into a kingdom, which gets you an additional diplomat, faster changing of your focus, etc. But it also turns you into the Prussian monarchy, which is probably, I'd say, the strongest government form in the game. Maybe the Ottoman government form beats it, but it's pretty debatable. The Prussian monarchy gives you -2 unrest in all your provinces. Monthly war exhaustion 0.02, not that huge, but does allow you to fight more. Monthly autonomy change is nice. Max absolutism, if you're going for 100% max absolutism achievement, is great. But more importantly, you get monarch military skill +3, which is absurdly powerful. It means that your monarchs will always have at least a 3 stat in military. However, it seems to take it away from their other stats, but I don't know if that's actually the case. But it does mean you're always going to have an excess of military power. And then at that point, once you form the Prussian monarchy, they have a game mechanic called militarization of country. For 50 military points, you can increase it by 10%. It gives you bonus discipline, cheaper maintenance of your army, and faster manpower recovery. I don't tend to use it that much because as large as you get pretty easily as Prussia Brandenburg, it degrades really quick. But if you have a massive excess of military points, which you tend to do as Prussia late game, you can easily afford to put that up. It gives you a bit more strength. Now, once you've done all that, obviously you can invade the rest of the H area and try and form Germany. Brandenburg's probably one of the best positions to do so, considering both Bohemia and Austria cannot do so. Saxony does not have military ideas. The Palatinate, Trier, Brunswick, Hesse, Cologne, the other nations, and Bavaria all are not that great at forming it. So, best nation to do Germany with is turn it into Prussia and then do it, then conquer Germany. Actually, historically, that's what happened. Brandenburg turned into Prussia, which then conquered Germany and essentially formed the modern German nation to some degree. Once you've got a chance to get an idea group, this is a bit of a debatable choice what you want to take. Your first idea group will not get you to your army professionalism to get you that bonus morale. So I actually advocate not taking defensive ideas. Defensive ideas for the additional 15% morale, stacks on the 20, gives you like 35. It's really powerful. Plus the additional army tradition. I argue you should either take economic for the development cost. That way you can build a bit taller as Prussia Brandenburg. But lately I've been finding that another really good one is the Aristocratic Ideas. And this sounds strange, so bear with me for a minute. You get some cavalry combat ability, which is so-so. Cavalry cost cheaper is useful early on. But it goes well with your infantry combat you'll get from your ideas. You have 20 infantry, 10% cavalry, which can be nice. But it gives you cheaper military tech cost, which as Prussia Brandenburg, you're going to have an excess of military power anyway. So this means not only can you get the techs easier, but then you can also afford to spend the military power developing your nation. And you definitely need to develop your nation. Most of your provinces have base 1 manpower, which is really sad. Next, you get the cheaper autonomy, greater autonomy decrease per month, which is pretty useful. You also get yearly absolutism, which is, I guess, useful, but kind of a so-so one. It's so small. 100 years go by, you only get 10 absolutism. But I don't know. If you're trying to get to 100% absolutism, it can be quite useful. However, you also get serfdom, which is plus 33% manpower. This is actually a pretty useful idea, considering your very low manpower pool early on. Also, you can get events that will give you, your nobles will give you more manpower. On the other side, you also have to fight more peasant revolts. So, balance it out. But then you hit one of the better ideas, which is noble officers, yearly army tradition decay, -1, and navy, but navy really doesn't enter into it. But that will stack very well with your already existing yearly army tradition decay, -1, plus your 0.5 army tradition. And if you take, for example, defensive ideas, you will actually, by the time you get to the HRE religious wars, you'll be sitting at 100% army tradition, which is absolutely crazy. In fact, it will give you an additional 25% morale just from that. I had like -0.5 army tradition decay a year, which not only gives you better generals, but better morale and overall better everything. An additional diplomat and leaders without upkeep is kind of nice. As Prussia, you're really not playing the diplomatic game of Austria and stuff, but an additional diplomat to reassure outraged nations over your conquest is always nice. The additional leader is so-so. You're never going to be so massive as Prussia that you're going to need an additional leader. Then you have noble connections, which is additional mercenaries. Not that useful, really. You really shouldn't need to be using mercenaries that much as Prussia. A couple foot soldier mercenaries is not a bad idea just to conserve manpower. But then you hit +1 leader siege and nobility monthly loyalty. The loyalty is pointless, but the siege comes in quite useful as Prussia. Especially if you build a lot of cannon, you can take most forts pretty quickly. Plus, anything that gives your generals better stats makes them that much better, even at 100% army tradition. It's why later on you want to take offensive, get the shot, get the fire, and then if you take defensive, you also get the maneuver. So that's +1 in every stat. For your second idea group, you can choose between pretty much influence ideas is probably your best move. Obviously, you could take influence first and then go aristocratic, depending on what you're up to. The big point of influence ideas is if you can manage to snag like a vassal or two, it'll give you more money, which early on can be useful. But it's the aggressive expansion impact +20 to give you a total of -30. Which is absolutely massive. I can't think of any other nations that have that level of aggressive expansion reduction. It's astounding. Plus, the chance of new heir will stack well with that event that gives you a chance of a new heir, the Ansbach event. I really can't pronounce the name. You can look it up. It's pretty common. Diplomatic annexation's okay. The diplomatic reputation can come in handy. Relations is nice. Force limit contribution is pretty good. If you've got a low base manpower, it means any vassals you own will give you more. And then the unjustified demands, obviously, as Prussia, you're going to be conquering a lot, so it's quite useful. One good tactic I've found, and this is a bit sneaky of the way of doing it, if you go influence ideas with the diplomatic reputation, a lot of times you can win the election for Poland's throne once they hit the elective monarchy, and that just gives you a huge boost of monarch points and relations with them, which is really strong. For your third idea group, assuming you've done influence, aristocratic, or economic, you probably want to snag defensive for the morale, the army tradition, the maintenance, the additional maneuver, the fort defense, the reinforced speed, the reduced attrition. The attrition for enemies is not actually that useful for you. You don't have enough land for it to be massively effective. But other than that, every other idea in that group strengthens your power as Prussia. Assuming you've done that, for your fourth idea group, I recommend picking up economic, influence, or aristocratic if you haven't already done so. What I did on a couple of my successful runs was take influence or aristocratic, then defensive once I got to my third idea, and then do economic. For just economic is really strong, plus the development cost gives you a total of -25, -30 with the Renaissance to develop your provinces, which can help a lot. Other options to take instead of economic ideas, you could take humanist. That way you can tolerate the Reformed faith and Catholicism in your realm. But I never find that's a huge issue. Usually northern Germany is Protestant anyway. Plus Protestants have the have one of their aspects of faith gives them another +1 conversion strength, so they usually can convert most anything. Administrative ideas is okay for the core cost, but the rest of it's all about mercenaries, and you really don't need mercenaries as Prussia, Prussia-Brandenburg, because I mean, you really want the Prussian government form, but even if you don't get it, you'll still be a military powerhouse as Brandenburg. Expansion ideas is useless. Religious ideas I don't recommend taking. You should be able to convert anyway. Innovative's not too bad. The monthly war exhaustion, if you're the Prussian government, now is 0.07 per month, which means you're never going to be dealing with war exhaustion really. But other than that, the rest of the ideas in that tree are not that useful. But once you get the next chance, I recommend you snag quality ideas for the infantry combat, giving you 30. Plus, it will give you discipline. You can either take quality there or you can take offensive there. Essentially, you want to get the discipline there and then the discipline for completing quality ideas for 10 plus the 5 from Prussian, which will give you 15. If you take economic ideas and you put it with quality ideas, you can get another 5 discipline if you see there at the top, for a total of 20. And then if you have enough absolutism or you go militarization of country, that'll get you to 125 discipline. So hopefully that's helped in that area. In terms of missions and events, you see this one, Conquer Silesia. That's 4 claims on all of these. You'll get some, if you form Prussia, you'll get Prussian expansion, which will give you claims on the rest of these lands over here. Assuming Poland's gotten weaker, you can get a mission, Conquest of Greater Poland, Conquest of Poland in general, and that gives you essentially claims on all this region, which is very useful. Outside of that, you don't really have any other conquest missions. It's very tempting to take those missions early on, like this is beginning of the game. Oh wait, I get 4 claims on Silesia. Oh, that's wonderful. Issue is you're never going to beat Bohemia early game. They're far too powerful. So, but luckily, not taking this mission now is not an issue. It will reappear throughout the entire game. Same thing with Prussian expansion over here. Conquest of Greater Poland, I think, occurs after 1600 and stuff. But you don't have to worry about getting claims to expand in eastward. It's really westward. You've got to be a bit tricky. I recommend trying to take the coastline. Obviously, as far as the Dutch, you don't want to mess with the Netherlands and their endless rebellions if you can help it, and then kind of move south. If you're going to form Germany, you need to get all the way down here, I believe, to Alliance or Königsberg. You're going to have both, so you don't really need to conquer your way down here, but you do have to get down here to Augsburg and stuff, so you have to conquer most of the HRE. Being an elector is quite useful. You want to try and win the religious war. Usually you'll be put as the leader, in which case you'll become emperor, which makes expanding in the HRE a lot easier. I don't recommend trying to unify the HRE as Brandenburg, though. Really only Austria can do it, or Bohemia if they take over from Austria immediately. So, in general, take event, Fate of Neumark, reject the Union over Ansbach, try and take the Pomeranian Succession event, or mission, to take these 2 provinces, snag Danzig and Königsberg. Wait till Admin Tech 10, form Prussia, try and take out some of these other German miners in the meantime. For your first idea group, take either Influence or Aristocratic or Economic. Then for your second, take Influence or Aristocratic if you took Economic, or vice versa. But try and stack the aggressive expansion impact with the benefits of Aristocratic ideas. Aristocratic ideas, you can take it or leave it. I found it's pretty useful these days. Then probably for your third idea, you want to take defensive ideas. For your fourth idea, pick up Economic or Influence if you haven't already. Then either offensive or quality. Then finish off Economic if you haven't. Stack the discipline. Get the achievement Fine Goose Step, 125 discipline. And essentially at that point, you can take on most nations in a 2-on-1 fight. You're not as powerful as, say, someone like the Ottomans or France, but if you have got enough allies, what you can do is you can target your army at their strongest ones and beat them that way. You're also really good at reinforcing in battles. Showing up to aid your allies in a battle usually will win the battle for you just because of how powerful you are. You're going to have god generals. You're going to have, I had over 7 morale in 1600, I think. Or even soon, I think it was like 1560, which is absurdly powerful. But truly, as Brandenburg, you do have to wait till you hit the age of absolutism, because getting absolutism on Prussia is just monumentally powerful. You should try and get as high as you can. I believe you get an event that gives you more absolutism at one point. I always tend to forget it, but you're essentially going to have really high absolutism, ridiculous discipline, pretty good infantry combat ability, insane morale. Essentially, the only thing you will be lacking is manpower, which taking both serfdom and then if you take, if you're Prussia in general, with defensive and stuff, you'll at least be losing more and having a large amount of troops, plus regimental cannons. You're going to be having like 60% additional manpower, which will help enough. Obviously, try and improve your lands. And in general, just become an absolute military monstrosity. Fair warning though, you're probably never going to get as big as, say, France or the Ottomans or what Poland, Lithuania can do, since you're really a late game nation that starts off really small. It's very easy early on to be surrounded and wiped out by a coalition or even alliance between Pomerania, Bohemia, Saxony. Luckily, you'll be safe from attacks from outside the HRE due to usually the Emperor, if Austria stays Emperor. But again, anything can change. But that's a fairly comprehensive guide to Brandenburg, Prussia. I think I've played a game as them. If not, I will definitely do one, and you can always check that out. Anyway, any questions, comments below, leave them below. I know my pronunciation's bad, so please don't criticize me too much on that, please. But I'll happily answer any questions or comments, and I'll see you guys all another time in another guide video. Bye!